Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Weiner Wellness Week right here at the World of Wellness. And with me is my very special friend and very special guest, Robert Scott Bell of the Robert Scott Bell Show. We've had him on several times. He has always been a featured presenter for us because he's just so full of information, and we just love having you here. So thank you for making the time today, Robert.
Well, isn't he special?
You are. And gosh darn it, people like you.
Oh my gosh, we have a good time together, and I'm so looking forward to, of course, this weekend in the Chicagoland area at the Health Freedom Expo, and it's going to be a great reunion. And I want to encourage everybody that's on the fence about maybe going, maybe not. Please join us there. It's going to be
Yes.
extraordinary, and we are uplifted and strengthened when we come together. So again, excited to be with you here for our friends at Weiner Wellness, and my gosh, doing amazing work there, and I'm just honored to be able to drop in from time to time.
Well, we love having you, and you spread such truth in such a gracious and kind way, and it's always for good, and that's the thing. You're never self-promoting. You are so helpful, and I think that's why you've been so successful and have stayed in the realm that you stayed, because it's a challenging space to be in, I have to say, where you are. But it's so needed. So we just really appreciate everything you do. And for those that don't know, Robert has a show every day, the Robert Scott Bell Show, and you can tune in right there. The power to heal is yours. This is an incredible opportunity, not only to listen to Robert and everything that he has to offer, but very special guests. And you have some incredible guests on. You were just telling me about one you had on yesterday that people can go back and watch that show.
Yeah, Dr. Stella Emanuel. I've wanted her on the show ever since she first came out with the frontline doctors and said, I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a 100% success rate. Nobody's dying in our clinic to COVID. And I was like, dude, and she's from Africa. And I've been to West
Mm-hmm.
Africa a couple of times. And I appreciate the culture. It's very unique and very different from those of us who have grown up in the United States and the West. And yet there's something so special about it. And she brings that energy with her. And yet
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing, when she did her thing, we couldn't get her on, but we played a couple of clips from what she was saying at the time, and those were the first two times we were banned on YouTube for playing our clips and not even having her on live. And then, of course, later we got fully deplatformed. So recognize those people that are speaking the truth and letting the spirit fly and flow. Very big threat to those Luciferians that are trying to, keep us imprisoned in a state of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So that someone like that and what you all are doing is just right on target. So I'm just honored to be able to do that 2 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Yeah. And for how many years now?
All right. So it's 2021, started in 1999. So this is what, my 22nd year broadcasting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. And I mean, you've done so much to change health freedom. And we will actually be in Chicago this weekend together for the Trinity Health Freedom Expo. And for people that have not had the opportunity to sign up, you can watch it virtually. You don't have to be there. All the lectures, everything. I mean, guests like Robert, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny will be there, Brian Hooker, Judy Mikovits. I mean, just on and on and on. So many great people. So I hope people tune in and support things like this. It's so important we support.
Yeah, Ty and Charlene Bollinger will be joining us, which is amazing. And
they're who got us banned.
Yeah,
Charlene
isn't that
got
funny?
us banned.
So funny.
I was like, you're so sweet. They just don't know you, Charlene.
They don't know her. Yeah,
they
exactly.
Don't know her.
And of course, Jonathan Emord, our good buddy, and he'll be at the Expo as well, speaking and talking about his new book, which I referenced often, The Authoritarians, that whole history of how we got here, in terms of collectivism as a mindset applied also, let's say medically or biologically, where we are not honored as individuals, as I recognize, as do you, our divinity, our special place in creation as spirit, has imbued us with life, thanks to God and the gift of life. And so many in the allopathic community have abandoned that. Although I see some semblance of a recovery due to the high level of fear induction machinery, even impacting the nurses and doctors now to say, oh, you guys were talking about this. I didn't really understand it. Now I do. What we've been warning folks about. You can't do a one size fits all anything to, that just is a dishonoring of your special place in creation.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that happened was the allopathic who experienced the side effects from treatments or injections.
Mhm.
And in that real time, like, wait a second, there's validity to what we've been saying. And I've looked at the VAERS stats. You know, there's more deaths from this injection than there has been from all the other reported. And I can't
Yeah.
say they're all the other because it's only 1% reporting up to 10%, but all the other reported vaccines combined.
Mhm.
That was an amazing stat where I was like, wow, the blindness, just the scales that are over the eyes of people. And yeah, and even with this new variant that we're seeing, I know you have some breaking news on that because your show,
Yeah.
you did a whole 2 hours
Oh,
on it. So,
stunning!
and
Absolutely
more.
stunning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you know, the fear that has been kind of overtly thrown over all of us in the last year and a
Mm-hmm.
half plus over the COVID issue is causing many to wake up finally. You know, suffering, intense suffering can drive us insane, mad to death, even, or it can facilitate an awakening, a
Yep.
reawakening, a reemergence of our connection to spirit, because we finally get so miserable living in fear and being disconnected from the spirit that we decide to turn back toward it and embrace it again. And I think that's the goodness that's coming out of this, that we're going to see a
That's right.
revival, if you will. And that's what we talked a little bit about that with Stella Emanuel yesterday. She's got a new book, Let America Live, or something like that. It's amazing. So go, you guys watch that. But specific to your question about the variant now, obviously, I dive into controversial territory every day on this show as I look at life, I look at medicine, healthcare, healing from a paradigm that is quite different from the allopathic, reductionist, collectivist mindset. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that we're all just a lump of molecules, and all we have to do is adjust the molecules with synthetic molecules, right? Not God created, but man
Right.
created. It's very arrogant. And so as I look at the whole viral claims of causation of disease, I have questions about that. I remain open minded, but you see enough over now almost 3 decades of work in homeopathy as well. When you question causation, what is really causing our problems? Is it a mysterious, invisible microbe or virus in this case that they can only see through electron microscopy, that they really don't differentiate between others so well, if at all? And then they claim they have isolated this thing, and the actual term isolation is redefined to mean manufactured. So it's not the same thing, but they use the same terminology and don't tell you they've changed the definition. And then we get into what you brought up, the variants, the idea
Mm-hmm.
that, my gosh, that first one, we got it under control, but it's not that the vaccines are failing. It's that there's variants. It
That's right.
mutated. It did. And it's a great story, and maybe there's truth to it, but I still look for higher level validation. I ask of our medical researchers and scientists perhaps more than they ask of themselves. And I'm a stickler for that. I'm an egghead. I'm a nerd. I get it. But I would ask them to go, all right, if you're going to make the claims of variance, you've got to validate those claims. Now, how do they validate those claims? This is what we found. Was it a week or two ago, Tracy? I don't know how long ago. It wasn't that long ago. It was just so stunning to find out that the tests for the variant, particularly the one that's got the most press, is the Delta variant.
Mm-hmm.
I joked about, now people know the Greek alphabet like never before.
Right. It's kind of like the alphabet with hurricanes. Now we got the Greek alphabet for
Right. Throwing it.
viruses. Mm-hmm.
It's like lambda, lambda, lambda. I always, joke about our Revenge
Right.
of the Nerds.
Revenge of the Nerds. Yeah.
Yeah. It's only a matter of time. But we look at the initial phase, and I have questions about the so-called viral isolation. I argue that if they have isolated it, it's a different definition and it means something different, not the same. But then they say, oh, variations of that. Variations of what? Variations of genetic code that they've sequenced through computer generated, who knows what, and then they send it out. Everybody shares it and said, this is it. And now we say, oh, well, there are variants of it. Now, Luc Montagnier, who I've interviewed before, and we have at our Patreon channel, we have it exclusively up there for our, group that supports us very directly at robertscottbell.com. And it was an interview I did back in 2012, I believe. And he was credited with co-discovery of so-called HIV. All right.
Mm-hmm,
Now, I know
mm-hmm,
Judy Mikovits knows a lot about this stuff as well, and she'll be joining us at the Health Freedom Expo. And I always
mm-hmm.
like talking to her about it. I mean, I think I even challenge her, and I love her. Believe me, I'm not about that.
Oh
I
yeah,
challenge everybody because it's how
she
we
loves
learn.
it too.
Yeah, exactly. No, and she's game. She rolls with it, which is cool. But the idea that a retrovirus that was actually never caught in the act of doing anything could cause slow death, right? Because
Right.
viruses used to be considered immediate, explosive, billions of
Mm-hmm.
replicant copies creating scenarios. And it's like this one, we can't even really, it's there, it's not there. We don't have a test that's validated for it. So that history for me, I brought to the so-called COVID scare. The corruption of Anthony Fauci, which if anybody doesn't know this, wake up, because this guy is a criminal
Yeah.
on an order of magnitude that if he's even alive today in terms of his humanity, I don't know. I don't see
Right.
it. And this guy is living in hell at the moment. And suddenly, there's a robot operating as Fauci. I don't know. But this criminality has continued through our scientific establishment. There are good scientists, people with integrity that try to do good work, but they find out that it's corrupted by economic and political and other nefarious conflicts of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And so we draw that history that a lot of people still don't know. And by the way, I interviewed Dr. James Lyons Weiler, Dr. Jack Good Guy with IPAC, and he's actually editing a book by Bobby Kennedy a lot about the history of Anthony Fauci, that criminality. So a lot of this is still yet to come out fully, even though I've covered it and others know about it. And, Judy Mikovits
Yeah, I'm looking
knows about it.
forward to his book.
Yeah. Yeah. And Judy knows full well the criminality of
Oh
that
yeah.
Fauci guy. So why do I say all of this leading to the Delta variant? I want to give context and perspective that this is what I'm about to say is not a one-off. This is built upon lie upon lie upon lie. And then we just accept it as truth because why? They wear the mantle of authoritarianism or authority. Yeah, but they're authoritarians. They say, this is what it is because I have the coat, I have the degree, I have the established credentials within government or whatever. So we have questions about isolation. I'm open to any possibility here, right? That's what a scientist should do, remain open to possibilities, even if we identify certain things as definitive. Suddenly we find years later, my gosh, what we thought was this was actually that, because new scientific inquiry opened up a new line of thought. And so it's never hang your hat, the science is settled. People that say the science is settled are anti-science. I'm just going to say it right there, right now.
Right. Right.
And so if you question, you're not anti-science. If you stop questioning, you're anti-science. All right, so we come up to this issue of the variants. And I said, well, what's the validated test? If they don't have a validated test for the actual so-called COVID-19 infection, how are they suddenly now validating a test of a variant of something they don't have a validated test for? What do I mean by that? The polymerase chain reaction test, the PCR test that Nobel Prize winning scientist Kary Mullis said it is not appropriate a technology to identify an acute or chronic infectious agent, period. It's not. It's a manufacturing technology.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the FDA and the CDC even acknowledge this as they've withdrawn their request for a continuing emergency use authorization for this PCR test. So it expires like the end of December 2021. What are they going to replace it with? Why are they going to replace it? Well, because they acknowledge that it can't differentiate between cold and flu viruses, much less a COVID-19 virus. Excuse me?
Mm-hmm.
All of the world came to a halt because of a test that can't differentiate between cold and flu. And then you say, all right, but the variants, And by the way, Luc Montagnier says what's driving the variants, whether you believe in them or not, is the vaccines, the shots, the gene therapy to facilitate artificially spike protein production. In other words, altering DNA protein synthesis by synthetic mRNA, not made by God, but by man. And so now he's saying that's driving it because you're pressuring something artificially to change, and on it goes. This is how life works. Read a Michael Crichton novel. Nature always finds a way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we come to the Delta variant. We come to find out that there isn't even an emergency use authorization at the federal level for any so-called variant test. That each laboratory that is claiming to identify the Delta variant or other variants is self-validating. In other words, they're not subject to any scrutiny from an outside lab to independently verify that what you found is really what you found. They haven't even gone up to ask for federal, let's say, verification to get an EUA. It doesn't exist. So each lab independently says, yep, our test is validated. It's verified. Who did it? Well, we did it for ourselves. Tell me what other scientific validation happens that way, where you get to, yeah, my test is good. Just trust me. It's good. And so the entire thing is based on what was it? Was it Will Ferrell played the elf, right?
Yeah, right.
What is Santa? You Santa sitting on a throne of lies or something. I mean, it's like that's what I hear. It's like
you smell like, what did he say? You smell like pepperoni and cheese.
Yes,
You don't
Santa
smell like
doesn't smell like
cookies.
pepperoni, right? That's what I feel like. It's such a fiction that, I feel like Will Ferrell in that movie, or, the concept of the emperor wears no clothes, the little child that finally sees the emperor's butt naked and ugly, and everybody's like, oh, it's the finest clothing because authoritarianism. We just play into it. So it's stunning. It's shocking for those that still believe that there is legitimacy in a lot of the science of COVID. It is not, but that doesn't in any way diminish the people who have suffered, who have become ill, some who have died, who arguably have died because of allopathic intervention.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I want to differentiate between the acknowledgement of ailments, illnesses, symptoms that can be life-threatening, and all the treatment for it, and the causation not being validated and verified. So people don't say, you're a denier. No, I deny nothing except that they've actually established a definitive test for the original thing, much less variants. So I pause there and see if that picture has been painted in a way that folks that are watching and listening right now can kind of sort of make sense of, oh, man, that's really wild. Is that, I sort of understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, people are saying great info. I think the very thing that really surprises me is people don't understand that the gold standard test that the FDA, CDC, and the powers that be are using to define whether or not this is a real active thing is not even a diagnostic test at all.
Correct.
And we still use it. We use it to determine diagnoses. We use it to determine quarantine levels everywhere. And it's so disruptive, and it's false because you can be symptomatic and it comes up negative, and have no symptoms and it comes up positive. And then regardless, whether it's negative or positive, they still quarantine kids in school. It makes absolutely no sense. And for me, God is not a God of confusion. That is the enemy. He's constantly trying to stir everything up and twist everything up. And that's where we are. We are in this confusion. And I literally said this the other day, like Romans 1 came to mind. And I'm like, that's where we are. God has given them up. He has given up these people to confusion. He has pulled his wisdom and righteousness from them, even if they are believers and they can't make sense of things. It's like you literally say logical things to these people and they're like, well, that just makes no sense. And I'm like, how does that not make sense? So what you're saying is so poignant. And that, you know what, we've had many sicknesses, lots of diseases, lots of things that have gone around, and it's never been like this. So there's something off. There's something off. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to think this is not right. There's something wrong.
And we bring in the spiritual discussion. You and I love doing that. You know that. And I recognize we have viewers from all backgrounds and religions and all of that. So I try to speak in a way that reaches anybody, utilizing language that they can receive or feel and resonate. And, we've talked about whether they be Jewish heritage or Jewish religion, Christian, Muslim, any number of these things. And we see them from the pulpits arguing for the shots. We actually had the governor of New York, and I asked the question yesterday or the other day, is it like,
I know,
is it possible there could be a worse governor than Governor Cuomo? And we've just answered that with this hokey local. And she's out there in the pulpit holding up a little thing like, and I have my syringe vaccination necklace I wear, and I need apostles, and God and Jesus would tell you to get the shot. I'm like,
oh my goodness.
Wow, how far have we did, but it becomes so overt and obvious that maybe believers will suddenly wake up and go, oh my gosh, just because they use the word God or Jesus, they are not actually flowing with the spiritual reality of what predates this by millennia,
That's right. Well, I mean, what we have to remember is that even demons believe in the existence of God. I mean, so let's not forget that. And I always go back to Joshua 24, where he's like, choose you this day who you will serve, whether the gods of the Amorites or the gods of the Euphrates River or the ones they worshiped back in Egypt, right? The things made of man, the things that they thought would protect them, the things, Or
Yeah.
as for me and my house, he says, we will serve the Lord. There is a drastic separation on, faith and belief. And that's what we're taught. And you said it best. If you can't question science, it's no longer science. It becomes a religion, then it becomes a belief. You are told to believe it. You're told just to shut up. This is what our belief says. Our Bible of the medical profession of the CDC says this. So therefore you have to believe it. It is no longer science. It is a religion. We have the religion of the almighty, what I like to call the Fauci ouchie. It's like everybody bow down to it.
Yeah.
So, but
it's a pharmaceutical death cult. And,
that's what it
look,
is.
even in theology, I have no
So.
problem with people. I have no problem with people questioning in religion. I think that's a healthy thing to discuss and debate. I mean, it's like in my Jewish heritage, we're all about arguing, right? But at the same time, we leave and we have our arm around each other at the end of the day. It's okay. And it's part of, I think, putting our beliefs to the test. And I don't find a problem with that. In fact, it's strengthened my beliefs and my resolve and my faith by doing that and saying, I want to put this to the test. Is it real? Let's see. And you find out that it does work. But it takes often the intense, let's say, departure, right? The abandonment, the freedom that we've been given by God to make what we call wrong choices, sinful choices even, to come back. We have to learn about that, and it has to be indelibly marked in us so that we don't make the same mistakes or choices again. That's the path of experience. And that's where I don't condemn people for making poor choices, bad choices, because I've made them in my life. And to be ready to welcome them back the moment they go, I've suffered enough. The choice. And that's what I see happening right now, Tracy. That's why I'm not, I've got to do a second lecture, which will be the first lecture to open up the Health Freedom Expo. And I decided to talk more about the fear of tyranny and what's happening right now, because that's got us locked down and separated from source. Yet it's an okay thing to look at fear and sort of embrace it temporarily, just to feel it and see, that's what that is. Not everybody survives it. I recognize that. But again, that's the freedom we've been given, and the opportunity for spiritual growth, for reconnection in a time of suffering is often the time when most people then come back. And so this is the freedom we've been given to really screw up badly so that we can wake back up.
Same thing in health, right? It's like people don't want to give up their Diet Coke and their cookies and all that stuff. And I tell them it's not bad enough yet. When it gets bad enough, you'll do anything I ask you to do, right? The same thing. When it gets bad enough that you were that far away and you're walking in the judgment, then they're like, oh, wait, be transformed by the renewing of your mind and turn of your wicked ways, repent and come back. That's the grace that's given to all of us, is that we can be like, whoops, okay, let's go back this way. And that's what's happening. And I think sometimes you have to go through the suffering in order to realize what you need to turn back away from. So I think you're right on that.
Everybody's got a different level of suffering tolerance. That's the thing. It's like, I look at people that are suffering worse than I did as a young man before I, made the choices. Actually, I've talked about this through prayer to God, petitioning, help, please help, oh Lord, help me to heal. The doctors don't know what they're doing. In fact, they're hurting me. I had to suffer enough to be willing to open up to new possibilities, new pathways, things that I wasn't programmed to believe by the pharmaceutical church that I grew up in. Okay. So for me, the level of suffering I experienced was enough for me to turn away and go, I wanted something different. God help me. But everybody's got that different level of pain tolerance, or maybe the willingness or the tolerance even to take the drugs to diminish the pain and suffering, but not really address the true cause, so that we are delaying the inevitable wake up that needs to occur to make a different choice, or choices, as you talk about, dietarily or otherwise. And so trying always to have compassion for those who are suffering, recognizing their suffering is unique to them. It's not about comparing, I suffered more. Yeah, it's about their path, and being ready and willing and able to help them once they're willing to reach their hand out to you. Your hand is out to them, but not to bash them over the head because you perceive, maybe rightly so, that their choice is very poor as far as for their good health or other things, but to be a living example for others. And I think that's the most powerful way that we can turn people away from that darkness, is not by grabbing them and shaking them violently, even though sometimes we want to, people we love especially, but it's to continue to maintain that positive outlook, that spiritual basis for your existence, and be that example to them, so that one day when they're ready, they will recognize it and go, oh my gosh, that's what you were talking about. And it wasn't so much what you were saying, but how you lived. how you live. And becoming that living example is so much more than even preaching words. Of course, we talk, you speak a lot, but recognize that people will scrutinize your life and say, is she legit? Is she living what she's saying or not? Where's the hypocrisy? Because we're used to seeing hypocrisy. And so we kind of, oh, okay, it's just another one of those. So we won't pay attention. So it's very rare, as you point out, to live that way consistently. And I have to remain humble that I could fall at any moment. But because I've suffered as much as I have, when people try to tempt me with things, I was like, dude, you know what? I've already been so sick. I'd rather not go down that road again. So thank you, but no thank you. So it isn't a temptation the way it might have been at a previous time.
Yeah, and you know what? We all do that. We all fall. We're all human. We should never follow man. We follow God. That He's the perfect. So to think that we're not going to stumble along this path is just, it's silly to think that, and even for ourselves.
Yeah.
So there have been choices and things that I've made in the past that, I'm sorry for. But that's where redemption comes in. And the body's amazing. It's made in the image of God, and it has a chance to overcome and offset and heal. And I mean, there's no guilt or shame in finding the truth and then walking in it. And that's what we want to do here. We want that opportunity to be like, okay, what is the truth? Is it all over, right? Is it this new variant and it's over? What is the truth? And if that's not the truth, then what is the truth? Like, how can we help people learn and grow and not be fearful? Because I really think there's so much PTSD and anxiety and depression associated with this whole thing. It's been devastating to not only our physical health, but the mental health, the isolation, the separation, the fear of each other, that we're all these walking disease people. Like, we're not that. It's a lie. And that's the big thing.
We're like an abused spouse that keeps going back for more abuse every time we look at CNN.
So it's like an abusive relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, or Fauci or the CDC, FDA, or all of these so-called experts out there. They continue to batter and beat us, and we keep coming back for more instead of going, no, these people are, if they're not evil, they're certainly doing evil deeds, right? Maybe there's redemption there as well. If, I don't believe God has any limitations. It's just the human consciousness that limits itself in basically making a choice consciously or unconsciously to turn away. So we must be better. We must begin to break free of the repeated cycle of abuse, whether it be considered external or whether we abuse ourselves through these choices, and recognize there are good souls, of course, created in the image of God that are actually living the principles of what I call healing. The Spirit is what heals us. And everything else that manifests from it, of course, can be manifesting physically and other ways. And even, my gosh, yes, as we find, allopathic medicine has a place in all of creation too. Used appropriately, it can be life-saving, but used inappropriately, it's more death-inducing. And so we have to navigate some very tricky and difficult waters, because there are people with great, let's say, high levels of learning and degrees and intelligence that are either twisted because of the choices they made consciously, or again, they are just programmed into a belief system that is also corrupted, and they even mean well, and they believe the lies. They really believe them, but that doesn't excuse them from the behavior, nor it doesn't excuse us from following people that even mean well, that are sending us down the wrong path.
Right.
And it's, again, it's a high level of scrutinization or discrimination that we need to learn. Discrimination is not all bad. Rightful discrimination is appropriate. And we learn it by screwing up and go, oh, I'll do better next time. I didn't realize that was the wrong path.
Right. And not all fear is bad, right? There's some fear that is innate, that we just know is like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. That's going to end my life. But, it's the manipulating fear that, is propagated against us and indoctrinated into our mindset. And it's a slow process. What I noticed was, as I got into these battles within Pennsylvania with the mask mandates over kids and just schools, and only schools from 7 to 3. And it was just, I was like, wait a second, something's not right here. I had to study the law. I had to go back and read the Constitution. I got to be honest with you. I probably haven't done that since 4th grade. I was guilty of not knowing my inalienable rights guaranteed by the Constitution that were given to me by God. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do we get so far away from these? What is happening? Why do I literally have to say, I'm going to, put a lawsuit against you, to go to court, to be told that these rights were always mine in the first place? Like I was like what just
Yeah.
happened? But we have been so indoctrinated with history and changing history just slightly of what is bad and what is good. And, we've come so far away from the principles that are based in the Constitution
Hmm.
that we don't know what they are anymore. And we think
Yeah.
that Constitution gives us rights. That Constitution protects our rights. It is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, not for not for the government to tell us what we can or can't do. It's for us to be protected in the fact that we can or can't do these things based on our own rights, and the Constitution upholds them. And in our district, our school said, well, we can't grant you that exemption, that religious exemption. And I simply said, it's not for you to grant,
Yeah,
it's for you to
exactly.
uphold. Like,
Hmm.
I'm like, we need to change our terminology, just like you said. Infection does not equal disease, disease does not equal death, right? You can have an infection and not have a disease. And that infection can be taken out in 48 hours or 24 hours or whatever that is. Your immune system is up to par.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean you're going to get the disease. It's like people were infected with HIV. They didn't always get AIDS. People that have an infection, of, I don't know, measles, don't always break out in the disease of measles.
Right.
So that was a big thing that Dr. Sherry had started way back. She's like, get your terminology right if we're going to talk science. Let's start there.
Right.
Same thing with me on law. I'm like, get your terminology right. And you do know the word mandate is not anywhere in any place of legalities of like constitutional. I don't even know what to call it. The
Yeah.
word order is, but a
Mhm.
mandate is like a made up word. Like it's not
Yeah.
even a thing. Because when you try to research mandates, it's like we don't talk about mandates because they're not a thing. Orders are a thing, and they have to be approved by law making bodies. So even if like like for our place, like our General Assembly makes the law, let's say the Department of Ag makes a regulation, they still have to make sure that it abides by the law and that the General Assembly says,
Mhm.
okay. And what happened in Pennsylvania was there was just an order it came down with no General Assembly approval that didn't
Right.
even follow the law. And I'm like, and we're all sitting here doing it. And I'm
Yes.
like, hello, McFly, like
Yes.
this is wrong.
And
So
yeah,
it's craziness.
in every state, this has happened. And to your point, these so-called mandates are so vague that they can't hold the force of any law. They don't. And they violate many provisions as well within state codes and the constitution of the states, much less the federal constitution. And so, what you're uncovering is, some of my journey early on when I prayed to God, as I've said, for healing. And I was sent information like this. I was like, what is going on here? I had to learn about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, international law, international treaties, talk about the law of nations, but tell the history that I did not learn, even in high school civics class when they used to teach that communism was actually not a good thing. Right? As opposed to now, where Marxism is the ideology through critical race theory being taught in most every school, public and
Right.
private. So
Right.
we are asked to do more than we think we can do. But at the same time, the grace of God gives us the ability to know things when we need to know it, but we have to put forth some effort. Yes, there are moments in time where you're like, wow, that fell out of the sky in my lap. But I believe there were things that preceded it where we became open enough and sincere enough in our petitioning and our questioning and our pleas for help, right? There are those
Hmm.
that, as you know, and we've talked about this before, you as a healer of any kind, people come to you for help, and you begin over time to learn discrimination, right? The people that are coming to you that want a Band-Aid, they used to get a drug Band-Aid. They're like, oh, those drug Band-Aids are not working for me anymore. Do you have a natural Band-Aid? Versus those that come and say, hey, I really want to know why I'm in this state. What can you do to help me undo and unwind all of this? And so that's part of this process. And God knows when we're ready. And then we're going to be sent that which we need to know in time to know it and, let's say, operate within it because we didn't know. Like you said, we gave it up to experts. Oh, I'm not of this, I'm not of that. I'll let somebody else do it. And that's a dangerous precedent to set. And I'm not saying everybody has evil intent and will take advantage of your lack of knowing this, but it is, I guess, a natural law in a sense that human beings are fallible. That's why we were sent here to learn to hopefully come back by a choice to the things that mean so much to me and I know to you. So we are going to be asked, and we are being asked to do a lot more. And some of you like, just I can't do it. I just would ask that let's say, eliminate that belief system of I can't, because that alone is,
Right.
in my humble opinion, almost spitting in the face of God. God gives us this gift and so many gifts, and we go, no, I can't. You're like, no, thank you, God. Really? Really? You're going to tell God you're not worthy? You're loved so much more than anything you can imagine. And yet we would continue to reject the gifts because of programs that were given to us either by parents or program media, or on and on it goes. And so life works its way out through time, on this planet to teach us these things that we're setting ourselves up. We're sabotaging ourselves via accepting wrong beliefs, even by people that are well-meaning, trying to protect us, even our parents. They didn't know. And we have to overcome that. And again, by the grace of God, as well as spiritual practice, prayer, etc., we can do these things that we perceive to be impossible, or the things that were preceded by the words, I can't, that did not come from God, it came from elsewhere, to keep us from our divinity and the healing that we genuinely desire when we truly desire it, when we've suffered enough and we say, okay, I got it. I get it. I don't fully understand it, but I get what do I need to really do now? What do I really need to understand and move forward here to make a difference, to make a change for myself first, because then only then can I help other people as well.
Yeah. And I always say, if you think you can't, that's okay. God can. And you just have faith. That's the measure of faith.
Yeah.
And, as we move along in this, it's hard. It's hard to be in this arena, because people just are going to come against you. And that's one of the things I'm always, have the courage to be disliked. And we have this innate thing where we want to be liked, right? We don't want to step on people's toes. We don't like controversy. My business might be affected. Yes, but you're not going to have that business. And you're going to have those friends, because when they come in and they start to take away freedoms, that's why I tell people, eventually they're going to take away something you care about. They're going to take away something you care about. Right now, it's not something you care about. It's something that I care about, right? It's my line in the sand. My line in the sand was like last year. It was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, this is silly. It's a virus. It's going to be around every year now. Our death toll for all of the United States has not changed. We've had the same number of deaths for the last 3 years, cumulatively. The average death age has not changed. And if this was so deadly, then people would be dying at home and not just in the hospitals.
Right. The killing fields of the hospitals.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So big things. Right. I know. Oh my. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that people don't know. They don't know how to advocate. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to ask for. They don't know what to allow and what not to allow. And you're not allowed to say it. And doctors aren't allowed to be doctors. They're bound by insurance. They're bound by this. They're bound by that. They'll lose their license if they do this. I mean, anytime a doctor gets threatened for losing their license for prescribing something they think would help a patient, I'm sorry, but why is the medical profession just sitting there saying, oh, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, don't let me be a doctor, because I spent all this money, all this time, all this education, all this passion for some dude at the CDC to tell their insurance that if I prescribe this, I'm not going to get reimbursed and I might have my license taken away from me. What happened? When was that okay? I mean, doctors can't even be doctors. So,
well, and that's why so many in the profession now are questioning, finally, the things they've been taught. Even, Dr. Stella Emanuel, who I had on yesterday, was talking about it. She was, advocating pretty much all so-called natural supplements and things as opposed to drugs, even though they're utilizing less toxic drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin in with success. And I acknowledge that. But even now, she looks back at the vaccination issue as an allopathic physician, trained as an allopath, and they're questioning things they would have never questioned. And it's taken this to wake them up. Now, not all of them, but at the same time, we are being, and you brought this up, we're being asked to question what we truly value. As you said, you might not value this and you might not, but at a certain point, it's going to come get you and you're going to go, oh, well, that, and now it might be too late in those cases when it comes to a loss of total freedom. But what is really important here, as many people of many professions that are being threatened with the experimental gene therapy injection mandates they wrongly call vaccines, and they're walking away by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands. Percentage wise, I am beginning to question the claims of, let's say, vaccine acceptance on this COVID shot. They claim it's X percentage of the people. I don't think it is, as evidenced by the number of people that are willing to walk away, whether it be the military or medicine or fire departments, police departments, government workers, etc. And they got a big problem, the elite controllers, authoritarians now, because that's coming out. And the more doctors and nurses and professionals step away, the more obvious it becomes, not only to us, but to those in their own profession, that they've been played and duped. Now, again, if you're willing to walk away from your career in medicine as a nurse, now you really have let's say a significantly principled stance that threatens what you perceive to be your reality, your ability to care for yourself, your family, put a roof over your heads, food in your body. That's how strong people are feeling about it, that never had this overt response to the things we've been warning about for so long. So there is a genuine sea change. That's why I say ultimately this is a very positive circumstance we find ourselves in the midst of, like, oh man, we could be angry about it, we could be sad about it. All of those emotions are very real and viable in the midst of the experience. But stepping back to see the forest through the trees, we go, this is what has to happen in order to correct course. And it could be much worse if we allow it to be, and we don't make those principled decisions, even in the midst of the discomfort, the threat to what our perception is about our livelihood, our work environment, what we thought life was going to be like. And we now need to co-create with God a parallel path that is honoring to the Spirit. And do you think God can't do it? Well, of course, but it's a matter of, do we believe we can work with that and do it? And they are working overtime, the bad guys, to limit our belief that that's possible or inevitable when we, again, align with the Spirit in that way. And that's why, again, I come back to the Health Freedom Expo and the opportunities we have to come together to strengthen one another, to come together. They are so threatened by people gathering together, as we know why.
That's right. They don't want us gathering together unless it's for destruction. Then that's okay. So, and I think we saw that. And yet again, we saw all the riots, all the this. That was okay. That was okay to gather. But we couldn't gather for church. So again, the logic was like, poof, gone from the world. And we had a comment, medical mafia. It's all mafia. The biggest thing that I'm seeing now that is so disappointing, which is not unexpected, but disappointing, is unions. Unions who were put in place to protect people are now siding with the powers that be to force people into things that they don't want. And the biggest thing is, if you look at our health professionals who stood in the foregrounds, right, where during the high contagion pandemic state of emergency, everybody had to wear masks. They were out there, in there, leaving their families, treating the sick, spending time with people who are dying alone. And now they're being fired from their jobs because they don't want to take the Fauci ouchie.
Yeah.
So, one day they were heroes, and now they're the worst threat to medicine ever known. That's so much so that they're being fired. How did we get there? That's the whole thing. So, yeah, there's so much. It's just like,
there's so much. Well, there are good people from all walks of life that are finally getting it, or young people that are seeing through it. We featured a video from a basketball player, NBA basketball player from the Orlando Magic, as eloquent as anybody on the subject of choice and freedom and respect, because they were asking him about, why aren't you taking the jab? He threw common sense like he was a PhD in common sense as a young African-American male, 23 years of age, a professional basketball player, saying, look, I had COVID, I recovered. I've looked into the natural immunity. It's far superior to and on it goes. But he said, ultimately, why should this be a problem? Where is the respect for people's choices? And on and on. So these are the things that are happening that are impacting beyond, our ability to reach certain cultures or groups of folks. There are people that are waking up everywhere. Now, again, we're still given the choice to reject what is right before our eyes and should be obvious to everybody. But for any number of reasons, our experience, our illnesses and other things, our arrogance, we can't or won't see it. But the difficulty, the suffering I come back to is, believe it's weird, but it's a gift. The freedom to suffer, the choose to suffer is a gift for us so that we can learn so that we can choose. I have to go back to the Jewish religion, the faith of being the chosen people. And one biblical scholar said, why are we the chosen people? He says, because we choose to be. And it was a brilliant little analysis to say it's the choice to align with God and spirit, as opposed to being lucky or being victimized, right? Choice is always there. And that's the deception, that we don't have the choice. But that's what you're using against us, thinking, well, you don't have a choice, right? It's a mandate. You don't have a choice. You can ask us for permission, but we might not give it. And then you just got to live with it, because it's not your choice. And your point, your awakening, as they say, well, we cannot grant you to do it. Well, we're not asking you to grant us anything. You don't have the authority to do it.
You don't have the authority to do it.
Stop
you don't have the
asking for
authority to
permission.
take it away. That's right.
Where
You have
none
to
is
stop
required.
asking
Exactly.
permission. We're not. Exactly. It's
Mhm.
exactly what I was going to say. It's not required. Their permission is not required. They
Yes.
have to ask you. They have to ask you. And that's what I kept saying. I'm like, I don't have to exempt from anything. You have to ask me
Right.
my permission. You can't put a Band-Aid on my kid. Don't
Mhm.
put a face diaper on. I'm like, that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
So that's where I am. And actually, somebody just texted me back since you gave me their number.
Oh, yeah.
And
Excellent.
he's going to try to be on the Zoom with
Oh,
us. So that's
so
going to
great.
be awesome. I know.
That is
Thank
so
you
great.
so much. What an incredible divine intervention right there. That's how quick God works when you are on the path of obedience. It is why when you're not on the path of obedience that there is such resistance, and they have to force and mandate and coerce and threaten. If this was so safe and so good for everybody, they wouldn't have to threaten you to do it.
People be lining up and even willing to pay out of their own pocket, right? To go, oh, I want that. Oh, give me
You
10 of
get
those.
donuts. It's free. You can find it everywhere, and nobody wants it.
Yeah.
Like the top 3 demographics that will not take this Fauci ouchie are biochemical researchers. They're PhDs. And then the next one is what? Blue collar, right? And then third is African Americans.
Yeah.
Like they're
Hispanics
like
not far behind, right?
Yeah, they're like, no thanks. We don't trust our government. We know what they've done. History repeating itself. Tuskegee. I remember when we were speaking in April together, and you walked up to that gentleman, and he was like, well, why wouldn't you trust it? And you looked at him, and you just said, don't you remember the Tuskegee? And he was like, oh, yeah. And they ended up going to the lecture the next day.
Right.
Because it was so eye-opening to them. They were like, oh, my gosh, what did we do? And then, like you said, the one lady had received it, and she came up to me and she was like, what do I do now? And I'm like, hey, the body's amazing. Let's talk. So that's the big thing.
Well, and in those circumstances, I always ask, for the wisdom, and I try to get out of the way. I don't want my ego saying, this is what I need to say. I'm like, God, Spirit, just give me the right words for that, soul, right? And it's a great gift when you step out of the way, and that's an experience like you just described can happen. It's not that I knew going in, I'm scripted. This is what I'm going to say when. Because people always ask, well, what should I say? It's like, if you're in the present moment, the Spirit will give you the words, and you're like, where did that come from? And it'll be just what needs to happen. Now, don't judge the outcome, because it isn't up to you. It's up to those who receive or don't receive to reject or accept it. But to be that, let's say, loving channel for divinity, that's the greatest. I'm getting chills as I'm saying it, because it's the greatest gift that I've ever been given, to be able to serve in this way, to be a conduit for that kind of information for those that are ready to hear it. And if I ever, and Tracy, this is you, I give you permission. If I ever take credit and become, the ego-driven diva that I think I am sometimes, you have permission to slap me. And again, I'm not a violent guy, but you slap me. It's like, snap out of it, like Cher did in Moonstruck, if you remember that. But, again, remaining humble in the midst of that, because it's just an amazing thing when that happens. And it's only when we're present and we are declaring ourselves to be that vehicle for Spirit in any moment, that miracles happen every moment, or they happen anyway, but then we can actually be allowed to recognize them in real time, which is amazing, because then you're like, wow, why do I even need to have faith? Although I'm not saying not have faith, but it's like, I know this is how it works. And so faith becomes action, and you don't require necessarily more examples, although they're always given.
Oh, absolutely. And, we should be able to hear the voice of God in those moments and be led by the Holy Spirit. And
Yeah.
that's Nehemiah, right? He was like instant. He stands before the king, and the king's like, "Why are you sad?" And he's like, "Okay, I have to pray real quick. Okay, here's my answer. This is what God gave me." Like, that's how fast it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gotten so far away from seeking that, we rely on our own ego and our own pride, and this is how it should be. And even with this whole walk, which, I'm just going back to like how this all was laid out in PA, out of our entire county, nobody thought to call the sheriff and be like, maybe he could do something. And it just was like laid on my heart. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do, because that's what God directed me to do. Not because I thought of it. Like, I'm not that smart. But then how it lines up like right after that. And you're like, oh, I know this person. Let me give you his number. And then he instantly comes back and says, yes, I'll be there. And I'm like, what is just happening right now? Like, that's not me. That's not you. That's not anybody. That's God. And when you're walking in obedience of what is righteous, it has a whole different path and a whole different anointing than when you're walking in something that's not, where there's chaos and hate and fear and none of that. None of that is from God.
You are no longer the obstacle in that circumstance.
That's right.
And that's a tough one to look at, because, our egos are bruised by like, what do you mean I'm the obstacle? It's like you've stepped out of that thinking that you can orchestrate it all. And you are now the conduit, right? And you are open to it, and you are then aligned with others, and you draw those souls into your sphere. And then it's like that 1 + 1 = 3 million scenario. That's why I say why we come together, why every opportunity we should take to come together. I know it's difficult to travel right now for a lot of reasons, but just like when you asked me to speak with Nutritional Frontiers, and I said, no, let me pray on it, right? I didn't say yes immediately, as much as I love to do those things. Let me, feel a spirit say, this is right. This is absolutely right. And that's the kind of thing that we are always going to receive the direction. It's a matter of whether we perceive it, recognize it, and then decide to act on it. And we're always given the freedom to say, no, I don't think so. And I think, we'll find another way, but that's I think the infinite patience that God has with us, and all of our, limitations or perceived limitations, to wait. I'll be here. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And it's amazing. It's like, man, we must really be loved, because as bad as we've screwed up, still, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm never going to abandon you. It's we who abandon it, only temporarily, because eventually we figure out the only way back to life itself is to re-embrace it and live it.
That's right. It's what we're hoping for the whole world, but we know even the elect will be deceived. So keep your eyes on God. Don't look at the lions in the lion's den. That's what Daniel did. He kept his eyes on God, and then the lions had no power. So that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And we have to just keep walking in what we're called to walk in, and be brave enough to step out and do it. Cindy says, please pray for my coworkers and me. We are federal employees, have been mandated to take a shot by November 22nd or face termination. Some of us are standing up and refusing and waiting to hear if they take the medical religious exemption. Well, Cindy, in the state of Pennsylvania, there's the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission that will take any terminations based on discrimination, that you can file a complaint and download the employee form, and they will provide you with a fully paid for attorney in your case. So don't just sit down. Don't resign. That's one thing they'll tell you, do not resign. If you must get terminated, and then file a discrimination case. Because I think this is going to come full circle. They can try to do all this stuff because they think people aren't going to do anything. They think people are just going to be like, I'm going to take, I guess, pride of my family. Right now, you probably make more on unemployment anyway, and you could probably win the case. So there's that. And if you don't end up gaining that job back,
there'll be a better one.
That's what I'm saying. It might be just a door opening for you. So we will pray for you and your strength to do what God is calling you to do in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to open my opening lecture at the Health Freedom Expo on Saturday morning. We'll be standing strong in the face of tyranny.
There you go.
Thematically hitting a lot of these elements, and also receiving inspiration from those who attend, because I'll ask the questions of folks. What has your experience been? How do you overcome the fear? And we will help one another in that sense. And then on my Sunday morning lecture, I'll be talking about healing at the speed of silver, copper, nitric oxide, and hydrogen. So that's going to be a fun one. That's going to be
cool. Yeah. I'm going to post the Trinity link here so people can go check out the speakers, sign up. We also are an exhibitor, Nutritional Frontiers. We'll have a booth, and so is Robert. And he'll be doing a show live there. So it's
And
going to be so much fun.
this has been a godsend too.
Ah,
This
the
is amazing.
CBD, yeah.
Yeah, U.S. grown, organic hemp, CBD, Nutritional Frontiers. I'm loving this. This has helped me a lot because, look, I'm human. I feel the emotions and the stress and the angst about what's going on. And utilizing the botanical creations of God appropriately has been very, very helpful. And I'm grateful to the team at Nutritional Frontiers. I can't wait to see Jamie Dorley and you and everybody. We're going to have a
We
great
will be
weekend
there.
together. It'll be
Oh, yeah.
amazing. It'll be a revival.
It will. This is our next revival. I feel it. It's just not going to look the way it did before. So it's going to come through health. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Thank you, Robert, for being here. Don't forget to go to the Robert Scott Bell Show, robert.scottbell.com, and check out his show. He's on every day live, 6 days a week.
Yeah, 3 to 5 Eastern. And so join us today. We've got a lot of good stuff to do, including Ty Bollinger joining us. And then we hit the road and get ready for the Wisconsin event that's happening outside of Madison on Thursday evening, September 30th. We have a banner at upcoming events on the tab on robertscottbell.com, including the Health Freedom Expo, the Truth About Cancer Live in Nashville later in October. So keep checking in, sign up for email alerts. And Tracy, again, big hugs and love to you, the family there, and I appreciate you so much.
Same, my friend. All right, I'll see you this weekend.
All right,
Thanks, Robert.
take care. See ya.
All right, guys, stay tuned because Joe Messino is coming up next, and he and I are going to discuss the top medications with adverse effects and what we can do, rather than direct effects of medications that may have toxicity. Is there an alternative? Stay tuned because we're going to discuss.